What's happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the show. Had to take care of a quick piece of business. We're starting about 2 minutes late from the scheduled 4:15 start time, which is already a little late. My hat's looking a little cockeyed in the screen here. Had to update real quick for the article. I just threw a note in there. Yu Darvish is not making the start tonight for the Padres, if you hadn't noticed that yet. So I just got that updated in the article, updated on the back end in the model. Got all the lineups loaded up into all the currently confirmed lineups loaded up for this massive 15 gamer. Yeah, Steven Leibowitz in the chat saying it's only a 937 game slate tonight. Yeah, that's literally been working on this since about 9:37 this morning, buddy, and putting all the tools together, writing up the 30 different teams with like 1,000 words each. It was a labor of love today, but it was a lot of fun. Got it done just in time, took the dog out, and now I'm jumping back on to talk it all through. So should be a fun one to go through. We don't have a ton of time. We'll let people trickle into the chat as we get rolling here, but welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining me. Hit the old like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Got a good number of subscribers for a channel that's only been around for a few weeks, and let's face it, has me doing the social media marketing and not doing a great job of it. So I appreciate all you guys spreading the word, hitting the subscribe buttons, hitting the likes, giving me the love and all of that stuff. Jump in our free Discord if you're not there. The site's rotoscouts.com if you happen to not know, if you're your first day with us. All the content up there is free. We've got the home run picks, the power index, the stacks model, and then the deep article overview articles. So a ton of content up there, but let's dive into this thing because we've got a hell of a lot to talk about. So starting us off, the Reds and the Orioles. Kind of an interesting matchup for the first one off the top of the deck. We've got Andrew Abbott, we've got Tyler Wells, a couple of quality pitchers. Abbott has been deceptively good, I think, to start his career. Like, he's probably going to get a little bit of attention despite a 10-2 price tag on FanDuel, and it's somewhat warranted. He's got a good projection. He's going up against the Orioles here, who have been feeding some decent projections the other way to some of these pitchers with the weaker back end that they've got in their lineup. Top end is good. About 5 down gets a little bit weak, though they do have Jordan Westberg dropped in there now, premium rookie prospect. So we'll see what happens with the O's, but it's an interesting spot for Abbott. He's dominated with a 1.14 ERA in his first 4 starts, but the reality of the situation is more like that 4.83 xFIP. Probably settles into like the low 4s somewhere over time. 0.97 whip. Kind of benefiting from some very low batting average on balls in play in the tiny sample there because he's walking about 10% with his 24% strikeout rate. So there's some up, there's some down for Andrew Abbott. I think he's been deceptively good. 3.26% home runs. It's only a few home runs in 23 2/3 innings, but giving up a 9.8% barrel, 44.3% hard hits, 91.5 miles an hour average exit velo. I wouldn't be stunned to see Abbott get a little bit dinged in this matchup tonight. He does project well. I will have some. I think he's a better option for the cheap 8,600 over on DK. That's a pretty good price to get this kid at. So I think he's effective there. I think he's overpriced on FanDuel. What the hope would be if you're going to him is that the FanDuel price cuts into his popularity on a big slate. Maybe you get him with single-digit popularity, and then you're dealing with a more viable play. He definitely has punch-out upside in this matchup against the O's, but they've been at least relatively effective, and there's certainly hitters who know how to draw a walk, which could exploit his weakness so far. So it's a little bit both-sided for me. This is a game where it's like, it's two exciting, fun young offenses. I think, enjoy watching this game more than I necessarily need much of it from either side in DFS purposes. Wells has been effective, 8,400, 9,200. The price is about right. If it was a smaller slate, I'd have some interest there. He projects out okay, 26.19 in the model, so projects out okay for a handful of innings. Good 26.3% strikeout rate on the year, has been effective in limiting walks at 5.7%, 3.22 ERA, a 4.11 xFIP. He's been very good. The problems for Wells have come up around contact, 11.5% barrel rate, 38.8% hard hits, a 5.37% home run rate in his 14 starts. So he gives up just a little bit too much power. Going up against this exciting, emerging, fun young Reds team, I'd probably just rather grab some bats. Grab some bats on the Reds side, maybe grab some bats on the Orioles side, and maybe not tangle with the pitchers, even though I do think both of these guys are good arms. I just don't love the FanDuel price for Abbott. I would have more interest in him on DK. And then Wells just kind of falls into awkward-ish FanDuel price. 92, there's maybe enough there where you could get him, but I don't love Wells in this spot, just on the idea that it's a deep slate with a lot of quality pitching. So we'll see how much Wells comes up in the model. If he starts coming up, I don't think I would, push him down. Same story with Abbott. If I start getting to shares of him, I'm not going to avoid it because I don't think either one's going to be like crushingly popular or anything like that. I just kind of prefer the bats. Red side of things, TJ Friedel, Matt McClain, Jonathan India, Ellie, Jake Fraley, Joey Votto, Spencer Steer. That top 7 is pretty good. They're not all that high priced. Lost 3 games in a row now after their ridiculous 12-game win streak. But you get good power, you get good speed in a nice blend through that lineup there. Friedel, 4 home runs, 12 stolen bases, 309, 378, 464 to lead off, creating runs 23% better than average. Not a premium player by any means, but not priced like one. He just leads things off as a good correlated scoring option with a little bit of individual upside. The true qualities from McClain, India, De La Cruz, maybe some Fraley and Joey Votto there, and Spencer Steer as well. Steer's having a really good season. It's nice that they added outfield eligibility to him on both sites, so you don't get pushed around by the Votto play. You can play both of those guys in a lineup, and both of them weren't being in a lineup. Votto, 3 home runs in his 23 plate appearances. We know he's got power. We know he's still got a fantastic eye at the plate. The batting average will probably fall as the season goes on. The WRC Plus obviously isn't going to be 110% better than average in a full sample, but Joey Votto's still very playable here. Steer's having a great year. Fraley, good lefty power. It doesn't really show in terms of the contact profile. 8.8% barrels, only a 30.8% hard hit rate, but somehow turns that into decent home run upside. 11 homers on the season in 224 plate appearances. So you get good production from Fraley. Ellie's obviously an emerging star. Probably shouldn't be the most expensive player on the FanDuel slate at $4,700, but here we are. 58 is probably about the right price on the DK slate. 3 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 30% strikeouts. So there is, he's pushing strikeouts back the other way, but he's an emerging star. So gotta love going to Ellie. At the same time, the top end, at least of the Orioles lineup, is similarly strewn with good young talent, very high end hitters. Joker does like Ellie, Bird Nerd. He always gets excited when Ellie's name comes up. So there's good young talent through the Orioles lineup as well. It's a matchup of 2 emerging, really talented young teams that are developing and should be very good competitive teams over the next few years. So it'll be fun to watch. Like I said, though, I think it's more fun right now, especially on the Orioles side, than it is necessary to go to for DFS purposes. I think there's enough upside in Abbott, and I think he's talented enough that he just kind of checks the upside for the Orioles. It's not like they're not going to score, 3, 4 runs, 5 runs maybe, but I don't see that big bendy score from the Orioles. And I think this, the back end, Aaron Hicks hitting 5th, Urias, for all his talent, he's a good value play, but I don't want him as like a focal point in stacks. I prefer him like 7th or 8th when nobody's on him. 2,725, hitting 6th in the middle of a stack that might get some popularity today. I don't love. I do really like Westberg at the dead minimum, 2,000 on the DK slate, 2,600. DK not raising his price. He's one of the premium prospects in baseball. Not raising his price is kind of criminal, but here we are, 2,000 dead minute shortstop on DK. So plenty of value there. Up and down, for the Orioles, you can roster this team from top to bottom. There are effective pieces in the bottom end of the lineup, but I think they're flawed. Mateo's been really, really slumping since the end of April, like we've talked about. 21 stolen bases is great, but not a lot there for Mateo. McKenna, meh. So it's really a top 4 there. Hayes, Rushman, Santander, Henderson is where you're getting your quality on the Orioles side of things. Let me tell Joker to go lie down. Hey, Joker, go lie down, pal. Come on. Over here. We do this every day. This shouldn't surprise you anymore. Come lie down. Let's see who's in the chat. Podegen Stoner, what's going on, buddy? Lone Wolf's in the chat. Kevin O. Phil Still, what's going on, everybody? Steven Leibowitz is there. Bird Nerd. Anthony Falia. Got Dennis in the chat. Chuck Deuces. Obi-Wan. We got basically everybody's hanging out tonight. I know Gun's not on, so maybe we're picking up a little bit of steam from that. Gun was resting his voice today. He was, if you heard us yesterday, he was squeaking his way through that show. Blows out that voice cutting those wrestling promos, but needs it to talk about baseball. We need him in the baseball community. We can't have him taking these days off. So welcome, everybody. Appreciate everybody jumping in here. David Peterson chalk on FanDuel is surprising. I do like that David Peterson spot. I wasn't expecting him to be chalk, 17%. That's a lot of ownership on a 30-man slate. We'll get to it. I was intrigued by that spot, though. A guy who really didn't deserve that demotion that he got earlier in the year. We'll get into it. Let's move on from this one. So this one's kind of like a take or leave any part of it. You can roster Reds, you can roster Orioles, you can roster Abbott and Wells. I would probably say Reds bats, Abbott, Orioles bats, Wells. It's all really close though. I think that's where I come down on that one. Pods and Pirates, Reese, Kinnear. Is the K silent? I assume it's a silent K. Near, like knife, near. It's not my fault his name's spelled stupidly. Anyway, this guy's starting for the Padres. 3 2/3 innings, 16.7% strikeouts, 16.7% walks. That's a handful of strikeouts and a handful of walks in 3 2/3. I do not know much about this pitcher. I just dropped him into the thing here. Lee can take a quick look over here. Team ranked 10 in last year's prospect report. Let's see what he's done in the minors. 27.3% strikeouts in 36 2/3 in the minors in AAA this year. A 3.93 ERA with a 4.53 xFIP. Was not great for strikeouts in years past. Has a little bit of major league experience. 46 1/3 in the show. 6.11 on the xFIP. 5.24 on the earned runs. 16% strikeout rate. 13.1% walks in a handful of appearances over the last 3 years. Not much here. I wouldn't expect a full start. I wouldn't expect very much quality here. So minor bump to the Padres stack. I wasn't really a fan of the Pirates stack. Wasn't really a fan of the spot overall. I think without Brian Reynolds in this lineup, they obviously take a big hit in terms of their quality upside here, but maybe get a little bit of a bump. Obviously not facing Yu Darvish anymore is going to improve their situation here. Maybe you go to a few shares of Josh Palacios, McCutch, Henry Davis, Carlos Santana, Jack Sawinski off the top. It's not a great opportunity, though. I like Rodolfo Castro when there's a lefty on the mound a little bit better. Maybe they're bringing in a lefty on the back of near here, but not really seeing a ton for the Pirates. Sawinski's their big-time power bat, 15 home runs on the season, a 261 ISO is very good, 217, 336, 478. It's important to be realistic about who Jack Sawinski is, but the premium contact is certainly viable. McCutch has been way down over the last few weeks after a really nice start to the season. He'll settle into probably, more this kind of production, through the course of the rest of the season with bright spots. The price is fine, $4,200, $2,900. Henry Davis, their premium rookie, sucks that he doesn't have catcher eligibility on DK. That would be a great lineup spot for him at 22 if he did. Semi-productive in the outfield on DK. Certainly a good value price for a kid who is a premium prospect. Mid-range power, very good speed for Henry Davis. Plays better as a catcher, though, where you're getting like 20 home runs and 15 stolen bases. Makes you JT Realmuto as a catcher. It just makes you kind of like an average outfielder. But the price is right. So minor interest in the Pirates against this version of the Padres pitcher. The Padres, I think, are a good stacking opportunity. I expect they'll be at least somewhat popular going up against Rich Hill here. Hill really doesn't have much left. 21.1% on the strikeouts, 4.52 xFIP, 4.34 ERA. They're slightly below league average numbers. These are non-tragic numbers, but they're certainly not like, premium Rich Hill days for as good as he ever was. It's a moderate strikeout rate, not a lot of swinging strikes, not a great ability to punch his way out of jams. Then he's getting himself into more jams, giving up a little bit more in terms of the premium contact these days, 10.8% on the barrels, 40.6% hard hits, 3.06% home runs. So it just kind of feeds into the idea of some upside for the Pods. We've got the Ha-Sung Kim version of the lineup here for San Diego. Seeing a lot of these lineups for the first time after I dropped in all the confirms just before the show started. But Kim, Tatis, Soto, Machado, Bogarts, Gary Sanchez, Nelson Cruz. You get the memory of Nelson Cruz and all those home runs he used to hit against left-handed pitchers. He's got 5 home runs on the season. I think 3 of them are against lefties, if I remember correctly. Hasn't done a lot, but one last showdown for the road between Nelson Cruz and Rich Hill after all these years. Probably what we're getting here. Yeah, Steven Lewis, yeah, exactly. Dick Mountain's a guy who's going to give you 5 innings, might get blown up, might find a handful of bonus strikeouts, but he's not going to give you a slate winning score, or is very unlikely to give us a slate winning score on such a big slate. So I don't really need Rich Hill. I will take shares of the Padres, at least 1 through 7. You can mix and match in some Brandon Dixon and Trent Grisham if you're getting carried away with Pods. But it's all about, Tatis, Soto up at the top. Machado and Bogarts are both underpriced. Machado's still hovering around like his regular pricing actually on the DK slate at 59. 33 is cheap for Machado on FanDuel. 32 is cheap for Bogarts on FanDuel. 54 probably, yeah, again, about right. So more discounted on the FanDuel slate. And then the stars, Tatis and Soto, appropriately priced. Soto obviously a little bit, arguably a little bit cheap on the FanDuel slate at 3,700 for all his power, the ridiculous hit tool. He's turned his hit tool around significantly this season. He had had an absolutely elite hit tool, never lost his batting eye, still draws like 20% walks, has been an outrageously good player, but his hit tool dropped from like a 300 plus average to, into the twos and the low twos last year and was in the low twos earlier this year. It's up to 273 after a pretty dramatic turnaround in terms of the hit tool. Decided to start hitting for average again. Always drives the ball ridiculously hard, 60.1% hard hit rate, 12.6% barrels. Juan Soto's a star. He's every bit as good as Fernando Tatis is. So both those guys go into Padres stacks. I think you can get to a good amount of Padres here. If they're crazy overowned, it's obviously a top-heavy, flawed lineup, but they're going to hit their stride at some point. A matchup against Rich Hill seems like a good spot to do it. Giants have an opener going. It's that Ryan Walker dude, and then I believe that we're getting Alex Wood. If something changed, somebody let me know. That was the reported probable bulk opener earlier today. But we've seen this team kind of stick around with the bulk reliever options over the past few weeks. So for me, I just don't need to go to it on DK on a 30-man pitching slate. Yeah, Alex Wood, if he is the option, probably projects better than a handful of these guys. At 6,100, I think he's in play. You can see he gets a decent projection here in what is a semi-limited innings projection. He hasn't been great this year. A 5.17 ERA and a 5.17 xFIP, only a 20.5% strikeout rate. But in years past, Wood's been a good pitcher. 23.6% strikeouts with a 3.41 xFIP last year. 26% strikeouts with a 3.44 the year before. So he's an effective guy. He could come out and put up a good outing here in bulk relief. I just don't like going to that spot. I don't need it on FanDuel. You can succeed that way, but the path is even more thin on FanDuel. 61 on DK, if I have a rock solid guarantee that he's coming into the game, yeah, you can play it. I don't love the spot. Going up against the Blue Jays is all the more reason to not really want to go to it. An elite offense with a lot of right-handed power just doesn't really play that well. He's been giving up a lot of premium contact this year, so if he's coming in a little bit flat against this Blue Jays team, I'd rather just get to the offense on the other side here. They're a little bit expensive, but they're good offsets for price in that lineup. Like if you go down the DK lineup, obviously you've got all those stars in the mid fives, but you get Brandon Belt in the heart of the lineup at 2,800. You get Varsho at 37, Whit Merrifield at 41. Even Danny Jansen, 35, is a pretty good value there at the catcher spot. 10 home runs and 167 plate appearances. We know Jansen can turn on one and deliver power as a low-owned catcher. So I like going to the Blue Jays. It's a playable 1 through 9. Kevin Biggio isn't a good major league hitter, but he does make hard contact from time to time. 131 plate appearances, 7 home runs, a 15.4% barrel rate. For 2,600, 2,500 at second base and in the outfield on DK, that's a playable 9th man in. Or 5th man into a stack, 9th man in the batting order. The Giants on the other side of this one, let's see if we got the confirmed in the last couple of minutes. Doesn't look like it's confirmed yet. Probably going to be roughly this shape. They've been fairly consistent with what they've been rolling out against handedness this season. So something along these lines, at least through the hitters we care about in the top half of the lineup. But going up against Kevin Gausman, not a great spot for the Giants. Gausman projects as one of my top pitchers. He's 11,000 on both sides, so I get it if people want to go away from him against a team that has been relatively frisky for power, has been kind of rolling in terms of X amount of wins in their last Y games. I forget what the numbers are, but Gausman's been very, very good. 98 2/3 in 16 starts gives you one of the more reliable options for depth on the slate. Pitching to a 3.10 ERA and a 2.93 xFIP, striking out 31.5% of opposing hitters so far this season, allowing only a 2.23% home run rate. This is in spite of a little bit of premium contact. 90 miles an hour average exit velo, 45% hard hits, 10% barrels. Launch angles up a little bit, but it's keeping the ball in the yard. Tough pitcher to square up, throws a lot of swinging strikes, keeps hitters off on their toes and keeps them guessing. So I suspect that contributes a little bit to his good fortune here with the home runs. But this should probably be a little bit higher given this contact profile. So maybe a little bit of luck in terms of the contact for Gausman. But I think it's a strong spot for him here. I know he's been Let me just look at my notes here. Yeah, last 3 outings he was been down a little bit. 4 2/3, allowed 6 runs on 7 hits, struck out only 4 against the Twins 3 starts ago. Better game against the Rangers, just 1 run on a solo homer, but only struck out 4 in 6 innings. And then had a 6-inning, 6 strikeout start against the Marlins. Gave up 3 runs on 8 hits and a walk in that one. So maybe a little bit more gettable than he has been. But I think there's plenty of upside. The Giants are a fairly free-swinging bunch, 23.1% strikeout rate for this projected lineup. That includes the 8.9% for Matos in a small sample here. So if we go these top 8 hitters who have a little bit more of a sample, we're looking at 24.9%. We'll see what comes out in terms of the confirmed lineup, but there's going to be a decent strikeout upside for Gausman. So if he avoids trouble, if he pitches deep into the game, I like the spot even at the aggressive price. I think you can roster a few shares of hedge Giant stacks. I'd be looking more toward like the lefty power, like a Jock Peterson, Conforto, Lamont Wade. I wouldn't have any issue just straight lining the top 5. I know a lot of people don't like to roster straight man stacks and get away from it to mix and match things, but I don't think they're going to be all that popular. And really, that's where the quality here is. If you wanted to work Blake Sable in as a left-handed cheap catcher on DK, that's not bad. 7 home runs on the season, a 104 WRC plus for a decently priced hitter. It's not a great bottom third. It might not be exactly this. Bailey's been productive as a second catcher in the lineup, 323, 352, 535. Creating runs 40% better than average in a small sample. I don't think that holds up over time, but he's been productive so far. Crawford, veteran, capable veteran home run hitter at shortstop. Matos, a slap hitting speed and defense prospect, but a well-regarded hit tool and defense prospect. So playable, but not great for the Giants. Favorite spot in this game is the Kevin Gausman spot, followed by the Blue Jays bats. I don't really have interest in the Wood bulk reliever opportunity, but I wouldn't tell you you're necessarily making a mistake. He's one of the better cheap options if we did have the guarantee that he's coming into the game for 5 innings. Giants bats is a lower priority option for me. Keep moving on here. Got to keep pace in mind on a 15 gamer. This is an interesting matchup. I'll say hi to everybody in the chat before we dive in. Chuck Deuces, extreme pitcher umping Coors, extreme hitting ump in Atlanta, extreme hitters in St. Louis, extreme hitters in Chicago, or Chicken, CHX, Chicago Cubs. You just use CHX when you want to refer to both teams, like that new Latinx thing. Instead of Latina, Latino, it's Latinx for everybody. Yeah, I don't actually follow umps all that much, Chuck. I think there is something viable to looking at that, but it's somewhat unquantifiable. It's one of those things that I just kind of throw into the unquantifiable bag. But I do think there's a little bit of value in that. So I would take it in context. Like, do I care about a pitcher's or a hitter's ump in Coors Field all that much? A little bit less. It could play in Kershaw's favor in that Coors Field matchup, so that does matter in terms of, like, does it give Kershaw a little bit of extra edge in a bad spot in Coors Field? It could, but it's something that I can't put a number on, so I don't love to bring it up all that much. But I think it's something worth dropping into chat from time to time. So let's look at this one. The Red Sox are drawing a roughly 5-run implied total against last year's National League Cy Young Award winner, Sandy Alcantara, who was just great last year, all through the year. He was a dominant pitcher in terms of keeping guys off base, in terms of limiting runs and limiting run creation and limiting power last year. He wasn't a dominant strikeout pitcher. Over the course of last year, in winning his Cy Young, he compiled a lot of strikeouts. He amassed a lot of strikeouts because he pitched deep in all these games. But over 228 and 2/3 in 32 starts, he was only a 23.4% strikeout pitcher. He was just great at, the whip. The swinging strikes were excellent. The CSW was just fine. It wasn't great. He was great at limiting home runs and just pitched deep into every single ball game. This year, he's pitching deep into ball games. But he's getting himself into trouble with big innings. He's running into, he'll pitch clean, and they were talking about this on MLB Central, so like I'm hearing DeRosa's voice in my head as I'm saying this, but it was very apt. He's pitching clean inning, running into 5 runs, clean inning, the rest of the game, and that's kind of how he's rolling this year. So it's dicey, but I do think there's still upside because all of that is baked into the price. He doesn't project well at all for me, which I'm surprised by because I haven't adjusted so much that the model should be cutting him by this much, but it's cut his run total. The back end projection was updated, so that's kind of cut down. 19.4% on the strikeouts this year for Alcantara, despite a similar swinging strike total, a similar CSW, just not getting the job done, not finishing hitters off this year, giving up more contact when when last year he finished a guy off. This year, in some instances that's turned into contact and base hits, and in the rare instance, home runs. Still hasn't been lousy for home runs, not lousy for barrels, but hard hits. There's a decent amount of hard hits, decent amount of exit velo. So he's just in little corners, just not been quite as sharp this year. And it costs a pitcher like this across the board when he's not as sharp. The stuff is still good. He could come out and blow the Red Sox away today. He could just avoid that bad inning, put up a dominant start. And I think for these prices, I'll at least have some. But based on where he's projecting for me, I just don't love it. That's not a great projection for even these prices. It's not like the situation we saw with whatever pitcher it was that I forgot from yesterday. Was it the White Sox pitcher? Whoever the hell it was. Somebody yesterday, I was saying, well, it was Verlander. I was saying, all his struggles, he still projects it, whatever it was, at like prices like this, where I was like, that kind of makes sense for me. This doesn't really play that well. I do think I want to get to some Alcantara. I do think we can roster him. I think he'll probably be fairly low owned, even with the price. And if I'm wrong about that, somebody let me know in the chat about the ownership projection. I expect that's going to be the case. And I think I'll get to some Red Sox bats on the other side. But there's some appeal. Maybe it's just the memory of him being so good last year. There's some appeal. I think maybe the more interesting pitcher in this game, though, is Garrett Whitlock on the other mound. 21% strikeouts over the course of the season, a 3.92 xFIP, a 4.50 ERA, pitching a little bit deeper into games, was better for strikeouts over the last couple of years. 26.4% last year, 27.2% the year before, is, in an ongoing sense, excellent at limiting walks, keeps guys off base, doesn't get himself in trouble, and is actually throwing with an excellent swinging strike rate, good CSW so far this year, pitching a little bit deeper into ball games his last couple of starts. He was limited in terms of depth in his first couple outings because he was injured to start the season. 46 innings in 8 starts, not a ton of depth, but ran into a few barrels in those early starts, but is pitching better and is facing the Marlins. The Marlins have been a little bit frisky this year. They got Jazz Chisholm back, so maybe a little bit of an improvement to the lineup, but it's still a weak back end. It's still ultimately the Marlins, and he's at a very good price, 7,100, 8,600. I know I just said that I don't necessarily want to play the Alcantara 21.9 at those prices, but the 24.5 with upside for more against the Marlins, in my opinion, at 71.86, I think is a little bit more playable from a guy who probably won't get as many roster clicks. So I like the Whitlock opportunity. I'm going to go to some Red Sox bats. You get the Jarren Duran leadoff version of the Red Sox lineup with Verdugo hitting third back from the bereavement list, which is good. Devers, Duvall, Tristan Casas. I don't like the final three. Enrique Hernandez, David Hamilton. Connor Wong is an effective catcher bat where you need catchers. Good contact profile, 6 home runs, 188 plate appearances. But he's not great for my purposes on FanDuel. I don't need a semi-good hitting catcher in the 9th spot in FanDuel lineups all that many times. If I'm building 150 of them, he can be in like 10, but not that many. The top end of the lineup, though, I think Tristan Casas is going to have a big July. Like there's a big week, a big month coming for this kid, and he's just never going to look back after he hits it. 9 home runs on the season, a 182 ISO, pulling himself up to the waterline, 99 WRC plus on the year. I love the contact profile, 14.3% barrels, 45.5% hard hits. 26.3% strikeouts. That's fine if he's hitting for power. That's fine if he's drawing that 14.3% walk rate. I'm okay with those strikeouts. I think a big upside is coming for Tristan Casas second half. Premium prospect, kid they're expecting a lot from, and there's a lot of signs in what he's done at the plate, even in limited form. 218, 328, 400. I'm not saying he's been good, but I'm thinking he's going to be, and I want to be ahead of the curve when he gets there. So these prices are great. I think you can include him in with Devers, who's a superstar, even though he's struggling in terms of the hit tool. 18 home runs on the season, 60 ribbies, a 245 ISO. Nothing not to like about Devers. All the lefties are in play here. Justin Turner's a hit tool star with still a decent amount of power. And Duvall's got tremendous power on the right side. So I think there's a lot there. A lot of good reasons to go to the Red Sox against this struggling form of Alcantara. The Marlins on the other side, it's so loaded up into those top two hitters. If they underperform, the lineup underperforms. If Arias doesn't get on base 4 times, the lineup underperforms. But they've been doing it so regularly that there is at least a little bit of potential here. I just think that Whitlock's a good pitcher. I think he's going to limit their opportunities. So you're really going to need those hits from Arias. You're going to need the big knock from Soler. But if I'm rostering Marlins, it's Arias, it's Soler, it's Brian De La Cruz. It's definitely Jazz Chisholm, who, like I mentioned, back in the lineup, hitting cleanup, which is a better spot than, for some reason, he was projected in the 6th spot on Schmabs. I guess that's the last time he was in the lineup. That's probably where he finished. But good player, star caliber player, 7 home runs, 14 steals in only 159 plate appearances before the injury. 90 on the WRC plus, has some work to do in the hit tool, has some work to do in the on base percentage department, but makes good contact. Tons of really toolsy guy to get for $5,000, 3,200 in the heart of that lineup. So I like Jazz. I like Eric Cooper a little bit. There's a decent contact profile there. There's the idea of good home run upside. He's got 9 on the season. Not my favorite guy to go to. I prefer Jesus Sanchez, the lefty, down at 7th. Maybe it takes the pressure off a little bit. He hasn't been good in his return in all of June. He's been pretty lousy since coming back to the lineup, but not as lousy as Gene Segura's been all year. Certainly better than Jacob Stallings and Joey Wendell on a game-by-game basis. So you get counting stats, if nothing else, out of Sanchez. So there's good reason to go to the Marlins in small doses. It's not one to get carried away with, but I think there's a little bit of potential there, especially in a Fenway Park game. Chuck saying Peterson's hard to ignore versus Milwaukee. Yeah, for sure. Stephen Lewitz is saying Wong striking out a ton lately. I haven't looked at the recent results, but yeah, for the season, 33.5%. So I would expect that includes recent form. It's a heavy strikeout rate. Mamba, what's going on, buddy? Getting close. Maybe I should change the logo to Rotoscouts. Hey, let's do it, buddy. Let's do it. Let's book one. I actually took down the late night tourney on FanDuel last night, the 2-gamer. Nice little $5,000 pop to boost the bankroll. Wasn't a bad performance there. It was a, what was it? It was a Detmers and Mariners and I forget what else. But nice little W after a kind of a ugly-ish main slate. I thought I was in decent position on the main slate. It turned out I had gotten to too much White Sox. More White Sox than I wanted on that main slate. But yeah, decent little turnaround on the night slate with the Rotoscouts logo in the top. I encourage everybody to grab the Rotoscouts logo and show it off. Hopefully somebody out there goes and wins something. So go take it down. With that in mind, did we miss anything from this game? Marlins, both sides of the bats are in play. Red Sox probably favored over the Marlins. Alcantara and Whitlock both definitely in play. Good value prices. I'll have shares of basically everything in this game. Fanatic says yet to take an MLB this year. Pretty frustrating. Yeah, look, MLB is the most frustrating sport. It's the sport where you can be right about everything and completely fail in your lineups. If I'm right about like 80% or 90% of a basketball slate, I expect to have a great night. If I'm right about 90% of a baseball slate, I'm going to go check my lineups and see how I did, because it could still not work out. It's like, oh shit, the Yankees got to this guy and the Marlins got to Whitlock, and I had a ton of those guys, but I still didn't get the right mesh of those guys in there, and that's all that really matters. It's amazing how baseball works that way. Fanatic, you can right now I don't have it anywhere, but if you want to like right click and just copy paste it off my my YouTube handle there, or just off the site right now. I think somebody Dennis, was it you? I think Dennis might have dropped it in XX Cubs fans might have dropped it in the Discord there at one point. He had a better version of it than I did. I don't know where he got it, but if Dennis, if you got that and you don't mind dropping it in the Discord for everybody, go ahead with that, buddy. I appreciate it. But yeah, right now, if you just want to like right click, save, or copy paste or whatever, I'll get a good version of it for everybody. Fanatic, can you from your phone? What am I, tech support? I don't know. I assume that you can right click somewhere, copy, drop it into your deal there. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Let's keep rolling here. We've touched on this one. Interesting pitching spot. I'm getting a big time upside for Mets power against Julio Teheran, who has not been bad for power so far, but I don't believe anything of anything he's done in terms of limiting power. I don't believe anything in terms of what he's done in terms of limiting runs. I do believe in the 4.75 xFIP. I believe that the 17.6% strikeouts are real. So all of the bad is real. None of the good is real, or maybe only like little margins of the good are real. Teheran was a good pitcher at one point, became a lousy pitcher, went away for 3 years, and has come back to make a couple effective starts, but let's not buy this. I kind of believe in the power index that I'm getting on the Mets, so I think I'm going to have a decent amount of Mets shares against Teheran here. Brandon Nimmo, excellent leadoff hitter, good on base skills, good correlated scoring, very good hard hit rate for a leadoff hitter, can put the ball in play, can drive the ball for a home run from time to time. 4,100 or 4,3100, good value pricing on Nimmo. Marte struggled through the first part of the season, has pulled himself together a little bit, up to 258 in terms of the average, only 312 on base, 21 steals, 86 WRC plus. It's not great overall, but capable veteran guy who is a, not elite star caliber guy, but a guy who's stolen a bunch of bases in the majors, a guy who's hit a decent amount of home runs in some seasons. He's up and down for power over the course of time, but the speed's always there. If he's getting on base, I like Marte, and I think he's good enough to drive the offense with Nimmo ahead of him. Those two might pair off for some scoring. Lindor was my home run pick of the day because I didn't want to go to Alonso on back-to-back days. Alonso leads the entire slate with a 23.66 in the home run model, but Lindor on his heels at 13.67, not a bad choice either. Lindor's been struggling in terms of the hit tool, in terms of the triple slash, but the power's been there. 15 homers, 219 ISO, 9 stolen bases, a sturdy contact profile, 11.7% barrels, 45.9% hard hits, and there's good reason to go to him at cheap prices. 4,800, 3,400 going up against Julio Teheran. I will take my shots with Francisco Lindor, even in a bad year. Pete Alonso, 24 homers on this season, a 307 ISO, masher of baseballs, going up against the guy who's allowing all this contact. There's a lot of reason to believe in the Pete Alonso homer. Hunter Bone says Nelson Cruz homer. Hunter Bone remembers the salad days of Nelson Cruz against the lefty, but I wouldn't put it past him. He's not really the prime Nelson Cruz that he once was, but I wouldn't put it past him to drive the ball over the wall. Kevin O, thank you for mentioning that. There are definite weather issues in this game. I forgot to mention that off the top. Let me see what the update looks like from the DFS weatherman before I speculate on just being in this area. All right, no update. Earlier in the day, Roth was basically saying this one might get rained out. There's a lot of storms coming, and that's kind of just the weather report we're getting here in the New York area. I woke up to rain. It was raining overnight. It's a humid, muggy, storms are in the air kind of day. You know those days where you walk outside and you can smell a thunderstorm coming like an hour away, 2 hours away? It's that kind of a day here. It's right now like we're in a patch of sunshine. It's warm. It's not so bad. But I do believe the idea that there are thunderstorms coming tonight. It's just a matter of how they hit. So this is one we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on as lock approaches. And we're getting close to that. It's coming up on 5 o'clock already. Jesus Christ. Oh boy. So keep an eye on the weather in this one. I don't want to put a yes or no on it. I do want to get to some shares of David Peterson. I do want to get to some Mets on FanDuel where I can swap out of it if it goes PPD, as long as it hasn't started and then gone PPD. I kind of want to get here, especially if that lowers the ownership, but it did sound like Peterson's going to be popular tonight. That makes it an interesting spot, especially with the speculation of rain. The last thing you want is a start and stop. That's tragic for everybody involved because I don't think you get Peterson back on the mound. You get limitations. So I don't love that idea, but I'm going to keep an eye on the weather. Right now, I'm interested in Peterson. 6,600, 7,300 is just too low. Those are very low prices for a kid who, even amid struggles early in the season, had a 24.7% strikeout rate this year. An 8.08 ERA is tragic, but sending him to AAA on that was reactionary by the Mets because he had a 3.42 xFIP. He was pitching better than the runs allowed number. The stuff that he can control says he should have been around here. So he was pitching a lot better than some of these indicators look like. Gave up a little bit of power, some premium contact, but it's a very small sample, 39 innings. And this is a kid who has proven himself a little bit at the major league level. 19 starts last year, 105 2/3, 27.8% strikeouts, walked way too many, but had a good ERA at 3.83, a better xFIP at 3.31, good swinging strike rate. 2 years ago, 24% strikeouts, the same 10% walks. Like there's bumps. We know it's a flawed pitcher. It's not an ace, but this kid has a good strikeout upside. For these prices, there's plenty of potential. There's plenty of reason that he's that popular against the Brewers lineup that has a 24.5% strikeout rate in the confirmed form here. That's with Owen Miller's 18.1% in the heart of it. So with William Contreras at 20%, a lot of the key hitters in this lineup strike out pretty aggressively. Christian Yelich is not good against lefties, or at least not this year. So that gives you a little bit of upside. He's been really struggling against left-handed pitching this year. Blake Perkins in the leadoff spot. That's a little bit of a twist. 2,200, 2,400. Perkins is a former second-round pick, a guy with a decent post-hype prospect profile. There's some reason to believe if you're going to Brewers, I would definitely include Perkins in that leadoff spot. That's an intriguing enough player at price that I could go there. So maybe like Perkins, Contreras, Yelich, Adames, Miller, or Urias as your last man in if you're going to Brewers stacks. There's plenty of value. There's plenty of multi-position eligibility. I talked about this with this team yesterday. It's a shame that they're not as good as they are, or as good as like I think they should be, because I do like the prices on a lot of these guys. Of course, if they were performing better, they'd be higher priced. But I like the pricing. I like the multi-position that you get on a lot of these guys. 2 guys with 3 position eligibility in the FanDuel lineup is tough to ignore at 2,600 and 2,300 when Owen Miller's hitting for decent average, creating runs at an okay clip. Luis Urias has power. It hasn't really demonstrated in 64 plate appearances this year, but hit 23 homers 2 years ago, has good power for those prices. So some shares of Brewers, but they just aren't that good. So it's tepid interest in the Brewers. I prefer the David Peterson side of it. If the rain gets involved, I'll probably really limit my Peterson exposures, though. Don't want any part of Teheran. I want to throw some Mets bats at him. So up and down for the Mets. I talked about the top half, but in the bottom half, you get McNeil and his, just BABIP-based hit tool, but at least he's cheap. If he gets on a few times, he can definitely provide a little bit of a score, but he's a correlated scoring piece. He needs guys behind him to drive him in. Tommy Pham's having a good year, getting regular plate appearances now, 3,000, 2,800, 7 homers, 8 stolen bases in 183 plate appearances, and driving the ball, 15.1% barrels, 51.3% hard hits. Pham is a decent option. Vogelback, platoon-based lefty power upside against Teheran. Brett Beatty getting a nice little home run mark over the magic number. So maybe a sneaky Brett Beatty play from late in the lineup. 2,900, 2,400. We want to focus. There was a lot of good talk, by the way, in the Discord today. If you're looking for like tips on lineup building, there's a lot of good thoughts came through the Discord with some of our sharp guys like J187 and Dennis XX Cubs fan talking through a lot of their process and what they look for. J187 has put a ton of work into evaluating lineup positions, looking backward on slates and looking at where the key values come from. And really, you want to focus on the top few hitters in any of these lineups. These bottom guys that we talk about are mix and match type plays. If Brett Beatty at 2,900 opens up a share of Francisco Lindor in combination with Alonso and Nimmo in a stack that you like, and then you can combine him with something good, that's where you work those guys in. These aren't plays that you want to necessarily make your focal points of a lineup build. They're not plays that you want to say, all right, that guy's just straight up low owned, so I need him in a lineup. Like, there's important factors that go into the nuance of talking about leverage and talking about ownership with a lot of these plays that I think go by the wayside in a lot of DFS conversations that are like the most critical part of that. At no point do you want to just make a decision because a guy's low owned. You want a good player at low ownership. You don't just want a player at low ownership. That doesn't necessarily apply to Brett Beatty, who I do think is a premium prospect, a kid who's going to be a very good player over time, but it applies to his position in the lineup tonight. So a lot of good conversation in the free Discord for rotoscouts. So make sure you're going over and checking that out for some lineup tips. I'll try and jump in there. I was just slammed writing the article today. Typically, I'm a little bit more active in chiming in on with some of my thoughts in there. But those guys did a killer job, going through some lineup tips today. All right, that's this one up and down. That's some plugs for the Discord. That's some talk about lineup building and what you want to do. David Peterson for me, barring rain. Some Brewers, definite interest in the Mets power upside against Julio Teheran, but I'll maybe temper expectations given what he's done so far. It's been weird. I don't believe in it, but he's done it. Another interesting pitching matchup in this one. Getting high run totals in Vegas from both of these teams. It might have come down by a half run since I last checked, but I was a little surprised. The Braves were pulling about a 5. The Twins were in the mid-4s. Going up against 2 good pitchers. Bryce Elder has been very good this season. Doesn't strike out a ton of hitters, but is very good at limiting power. And if you're looking at the Twins lineup, they do 2 things. They strike out and they hit for power. So if you're taking the power away, we're kind of just left with strikeouts, which I like. 29% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of this Twins lineup could feed to a little bit of bonus strikeout upside for Bryce Elder. He only costs 9,200, 9,700. He projects well, 31.42. That's a competitive projection today on both sites. With a fair price tag across the industry. I can't imagine he's going to be that popular on a 30-man pitching slate with like David Peterson drawing a bunch of popularity as a value play. I can't imagine a lot of people are rostering David Peterson so that they can hurry up and spend a decent salary on Bryce Elder. It's probably not how the dynamics of that slate are working. So I expect he'll be fairly low owned in a high strikeout matchup for a guy who limits home runs. Like I said, he does it the way that, the Frombers do it. Not quite to that degree by any means, but he cuts the heart out of launch angle. 6.1 degrees this year, 2.22% home run rate, 6.3% barrels last year, 8.8 degrees, 8.8 degrees, 5.8% barrels, 34.4% hard hits, only a 1.76% home runs in a 9-game, 54-inning sample. So growing sample size, he's been pretty effective at limiting major league power. Like I said, not a top-end strikeout guy, 20.8% strikeouts, but a decent 10.8% swinging strike rate kind of supports the idea of some potential strikeout upside here for him. On the other side, Joe Ryan, 10.8, 10.3, very, very good young pitcher, 27.3% strikeouts, only a 4.1% walk rate, 3.69 xFIP, 2.98 ERA, 93 2/3, giving you good depth in 15 starts. Projects well, but not great, which I think is probably what I want to get across as like my take for this spot. I like Joe Ryan. I think if he's owned in single digits, it's worth getting to some shares of Joe Ryan on both sites. I prefer the FanDuel price. DK price probably a little bit high by comparison to some of these other options. It's just that the Braves are on the other side of this matchup. All their deadly power, a 5-ish projection in Vegas, not to mention winds blowing out to left field. That's going to support the idea of power upside for the Braves more than it supports, in my mind, the idea of power upside for the Twins. The Twins could definitely turn on a mistake from Elder, but with his ability to keep the ball down, that has me less interested in Twins and a little bit more concerned about a fly ball pitcher in this situation. Ryan's been excellent at keeping the ball off the barrel, 4.4% barrels, 2.19% home runs, a .91 whip based on his low walks, and a pretty good batting average on balls in play against. But he's a fly ball oriented pitcher against the best home run hitting team in baseball. That could get problematic. And you could argue that he's a little bit lucky, despite the very good barrel rate, being a fly ball pitcher, giving up 40.2 on the hard hits, 89 miles an hour of exit velo. Those aren't tragic numbers, but you could argue that he's probably gotten a little bit lucky to keep home runs to 2.19. So I'll take some Ryan shares. I do think there's upside there. The Braves haven't been lousy for strikeouts this year, and they've been hitting home runs in bunches this year. So it's definitely a both sides at best situation. If somebody said, hey, I'm going to leave Joe Ryan to the field and I'm going to roster some Braves bats, I wouldn't think they were completely crazy. I do think it's probably a mistake to leave Joe Ryan entirely to the field. If he was popular, which I don't think he's going to be, I could make a better argument for getting away from him. I think you just take your handful of shares of him and run with it. But it's not a great spot. He could put up the highest score of the day. He absolutely has that upside. But the path is a lot more thin than a lot of these other guys. If I'm going to Braves, it's Ronald Acuna, it's Ozzie Albies, it's Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Ozuna, Rosario, Arcia, and Harris. That's all 9 hitters in this lineup. They're spectacular from end to end. There's tons of value in the 8 and 9 spot. There's premium power and, under appreciated hitters at cheap prices in Ozuna and Rosario in the 6 and 7 spots. And then there's just elite options from 1 through 5. So this is a lineup that easily plays from top to bottom every single day. They basically roll this version of the lineup out every day. Arcia is an excellent utility player at 2,800 with 3 position eligibility on FanDuel. It's a shame he only plays shortstop on DK, but he's a totally viable option. It's not like he's replacing somebody at the position on the DK slate, and he's been very effective all season long. Harris has pulled himself together. 6 home runs, 8 stolen bases. You were hoping for more counting stats, but he was below the Mendoza line a month ago. He's up to 260, 314, 417. pulled the WRC plus up to 96. He's going to be above average for run creation and a lot more expensive in like 2 more weeks. So watch out for Michael Harris at the bottom of the lineup. If I'm going to Twins, it's the obvious names. It's the Edward Julian, Carlos Correa, maybe some Alex Kirilloff, Byron Buxton back in the lineup, which is a bit of a bump to the Twins. But I'm really concerned about their ability to hit home runs against Elder here. So, maybe some Buxton, some Kepler, some Joey Gallo, but not a great spot for Joey Gallo. Even he is cut to a 5.16 in the home run model. Buxton at only a 5.61 with all their power. So that just shows you what Elder does to home run hitters. That's where you're running into problems. But if I'm looking to Twins, I'm looking to some of those lefties. I'm looking to Byron Buxton and all his upside and trying to grab a few cheap home runs. But I could see him, maybe hitting a home run on a mistake and scoring 3 or 4 runs tonight against Elder and not really putting up a DFS relevant score. That's kind of the path that I would see in what the model's showing us here. So that one was pitchers on both sides, and definite interest in the Braves, tepid interest in the Twins. We need to pick up the pace. Another good lefty pitching matchup on both sides. Jordan Montgomery, league average-ish pitcher. Moderate amount of upside against the struggling Astros team. The Astros don't strike out a lot. That's their one good quality, especially against lefties. They're pretty good at avoiding the strikeouts. So I think it limits the ceiling for Jordan Montgomery. 7,200 is the right price on DK. You can throw a few darts as an SP2 on DK for Montgomery at 7,200. He obviously projects extremely well in my model here today. That's on the back of some clean innings. He's thrown 85 and a third, 15 starts, 6.1% walks, doesn't really get himself in a lot of trouble. When he finds strikeouts, he gives you a better game than when he doesn't. Ultimately a better real life pitcher than a DFS one. I don't know that I need to get to too many shares of Montgomery in this spot at 9,100. I still remember the Astros as a pretty good team. They've definitely not been that squad this year, but there's enough talent in that lineup that I don't need to get carried away with Jordan Montgomery shares at 91 on FanDuel on a 30-man slate. A lot more value at 72 on DK. Framber Valdez. Definitely interested in some Framber. 10-1 on DK, probably a little cheap. 11-2 on FanDuel, maybe a little pricey. Going up against the Cards, who are a very good team. He is the guy, really. He's the mold for these guys that we talk about, limiting launch angle and cutting the heart out of power. Just look at what he does to the power index on these Cards hitters. You're talking about Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, both below half of a good chance to hit a home run. This is extremely limiting on these guys' power. Nolan Gorman's been so bad over the last couple of months that he's out of the lineup. It's a lefty-lefty matchup, but they were giving him some shots lefty-lefty. Totally out of the lineup at this point. He's been very bad at the plate over the last month and change. DeYoung down at the bottom of the lineup, 11 home runs, 221 ISO. Carlson, Jordan Walker, a couple of value pieces through the middle of the lineup. Donovan, Kneisner. It's not great through like everybody after 3 in this Cardinals lineup right now. So if I'm going to Cards, it's really only those top few guys in small doses. But I really don't like attacking Framber. Even if I don't go to him, I never really throw bats against him. He pitches very deep into ball games. He's been finding strikeouts this year, and he just cuts launch angle. 2.2 degrees this year, 1.54% home runs. Negative 3.6 last year, 1.33% home runs. Negative 5.5 the year before, 2.1% home runs. He just doesn't give up power. And when he's finding strikeouts and pitching 7-8 innings, booking quality start after quality start, wins, he's a strong option for DFS. So even against the Cards quality, I think you get away with some Framber shares here. You can get probably pretty aggressive about it. He's high priced, but he's high priced for a reason. So definitely some shares of Monty. Limited interest in the Cards bats. Limited interest in the Astros bats on the other side, but probably more of them in a total vacuum. I would be more interested in Astros bats going up against the more gettable of these two pitchers in Montgomery. If I'm going to Astros, it's Altuve, it's Bregman, it's certainly Kyle Tucker, who I never worry about lefty-lefty. Down season overall for Tucker, but 10 home runs, 14 stolen bases. From a lot of other players, you'd be like, oh, that's a pretty productive little season he's had so far. 5,700, 3,400. The price is down on FanDuel, still fairly high on DK, but definitely a playable piece and somebody who I expect to come roaring back to life in the second half. Jose Abreu shown some signs of life, up to 5 home runs, a 68 WRC plus, but it's been really, really bad. Jainer Diaz played himself into a full-time role, 7 home runs on the season and 135 plate appearances for a guy who started out as a backup catcher. If he's in the lineup, you can definitely go there if you're rostering a bunch of Astros, but he's not somebody to go way out of your way for. And you're not going to say, oh, I didn't get any Diaz, let me build another Astros stack. He's just a guy he's a functional part in there. Jeremy Pena has not been great this year. McCormick's been good, 2,800, 2,900, 7 home runs, 7 steals in 158 PAs. Decent player. The contact profile hasn't been as robust as in years past, but he's getting away with it. Decent little home run output, a 120 WRC plus and a 207 ISO. If the contact actually comes around, those numbers should all go up. So that's a pretty good option late in the lineup. Jake Myers, Maltino Maldonado, kind of mix and match plays. So for me, this one's a lot of pitching in Fromber, some shares of Montgomery, especially at the DK value price. I don't want to undersell that just because I'm not excited about him on FanDuel. This is probably a pretty good opportunity at the DK price. And then limited shares of hitting. The Tigres with Matt Manning on the bump. I think we can probably go to some Rangers bats against Matt Manning. Not feeling like I'm out on a flimsy limb on that one. Don't really see the need to go to Manning. 6,000, 7,000, only 2 starts, 11 2/3 this year, 14.6 on the strikeouts. Larger sample last year, 63 innings, 18.3% on the strikeouts. Was okay in terms of the xFIP and the ERA. Was a years ago highly regarded prospect. Never really has arrived at this level. I don't see any need to throw Matt Manning into the Rangers buzzsaw here. Their offense is just so good that why do we need to do that to ourselves? If you're feeling particularly masochistic, go for it, but it's not a spot for me. Let me grab the Rangers lineup, see what we got. Semien, Seager, Lowe, Garcia, Heim, Grossman, Jankowski, Duran. Not the ideal version of the Rangers lineup. Not that that's going to lead me to shares of Matt Manning, but it might temper my expectations a little bit in terms of what the Rangers could do at the plate against him. Let's take a look here. So Semien, Seager, Lowe, Garcia, Jonah Heim. So no Josh Young, no Garver. You get the Grossman and Jankowski drop in here, and then you get the drop in from Josh H. Smith down at the bottom of the lineup instead of Argaio de Taveras, which is a downgrade at the bottom of the lineup. Smith is cheap, 2,000, 2,100, multi-position, third base outfield on DK, shortstop outfield on FanDuel. Not a great player in the overall sense. More a hit to a guy than a power guy right now. 3 home runs on the season in 121 plate appearances, 204, 350, 337, 102 WRC plus. It hasn't been great. Jankowski and Grossman are like mix and match veteran types. Not a ton of quality. A little bit of power from Grossman, a little bit of speed from Jankowski if he gets on. Duran, I love from the bottom of the lineup. If I had built this lineup, I probably would have slated Ezekiel Duran up to 6 and let Jankowski, Grossman, and Smith just bring up the bottom of it and play it that way. But I get what they're trying to do with Duran, maybe helping to turn the lineup over. Top half is definite quality. Semien and Seager are superstars. They're priced like it. You pay through the nose to get them, but they're worth it. Nathaniel Lowe, much cheaper, 4,200, 3,100. Helps offset the pricing there. Jonah Heim helps offset the pricing at 4,000, 3,200 for a very quality catcher bat. 11 home runs, a 196 ISO, 122 WRC plus, and 275 for Jonah Heim. Definitely a good catcher bat. Probably going to make the All-Star team. Really like the output from Jonah Heim at catcher this year. And then Adolis Garcia, obviously a star. 15.4% on the barrels, 51.4% hard hits, 18 homers, 6 stolen bases. His running mate's not there in the heart of the lineup with no Young, but still like the spot for Garcia. So minor downgrade for the Ranger stacks in terms of the full lineup, but I still like 1 through 5 plus 8 at worst. Tigers against Martin Perez. Don't want to endorse this one, but I feel like I have to. 32.5 in the FanDuel model here. Puts him in play on the FanDuel board at 8,000. I don't love it. He hasn't been good this year. There's the memory of him being good. There's enough track record for the lefty. 5,700 on DK. I think that's an undeniable value spot. Even if it doesn't work out, I don't think it's a mistake to have played it. I think you definitely need to hit the Martin Perez button on the DK slate at least a few times in 150 lineups. There's just too much value there going up against this inept Tigers team. They're not good against lefties, even though they've got a lineup that's loaded with righties. overall, there's a couple guys in there who have stood out against righties, but overall, this is not a good baseball team, and it's not a good baseball team against lefties. Not that Perez has been good this year. 4.38 ERA, a 4.91 xFIP is even worse, a 1.45 whip. He's given up too many chances, too many base hits, not inducing swinging strikes, only striking out 15.3%. 15 starts, 84 in the third innings. I'm looking for the idea of 6 clean innings. Book me a quality start. Book me a win that they're almost definitely going to get. If he gives you 5 innings, he should find a handful of strikeouts and a win on DK at the very least. Like, if the Rangers to lose this game would be a surprise. He might get chased before they booked a win. That could be in play, but I think it's worth a few shots at what is a hitter price on the DK slate. You can talk me out of it on FanDuel. Single starter site, I need that quality start. 8,000 though, that's the right price. He could find a handful of strikeouts against this team. 5-6 strikeouts, 6 clean innings, book me a quality start and a win. I'm off and running at that 8,000 price. That buys me a bat. So I don't love it, but I'll be there holding my breath with Martin Perez in some of these lineups. Tigers on the other side, I don't really need to go here on a 30 team slate. Like, it's just not a good team. Vierling, Ibanez, Torkelson off the top, maybe against the lefty. Javi hasn't been good against lefties, hasn't been good at all overall. Eric Haas has been bad the entire season and against lefties this year. Scope, Cabrera, Zach Short's good against lefties, but probably hitting down lineup today. Jake Marisnick. What are we really hunting for with this team? They could go out and put a handful of runs. Somebody, Ibanez might have another productive day. He had a good day yesterday against the lefty, but it's just a little bit thin. So, few shares of Tigers if you're feeling it, but not a great spot in my opinion. So some definite interest in value Martin Perez, unfortunately. Some definite interest in the Rangers stack, although it's a little bit more limited with this version of the lineup than it was coming into the show. No real interest in the Tigers on the mound or at the plate, but I wouldn't begrudge anybody a few value shares. It's not like Perez has been good, certainly allowing plenty of contact. Phils and the Cubs. Wind is blowing in Wrigley Field today. Whoever it was saying some good stuff. Chuck, I think, was saying some stuff about the umpire as well, I think, in Chicago. Chuck and Trey having a good conversation in the chat on the YouTube slate. Sounds like there's been a bunch of chat going on in Discord as well. I keep hearing a lot of dings. Appreciate all the chatter going on in Discord today. It's been great. It's been great to see. Somebody was saying, hey, we did a great job. We took all the arguing the back and forth and made it our own after just a couple of weeks. But I think we're more productive than that. We're not getting into petty arguments about people's avatars and so on and so forth. Not that I don't love all that stuff from our pal Legalized in the Stochastic chat. He was a great policer of needing to know who people are and finding a good way to remember them. For a person with goldfish brain like me, that's really helpful when I can just be like, oh yeah, that picture of a cat, that's Chuck Deuces. All right, I remember that guy. It helps. So I appreciate my old pal Legalized. Haven't seen one argument on this channel. Yeah, Chuck, not a lot in the YouTube chat, and it was mostly for fun arguing between a couple guys that know each other pretty well, or at least Discord know each other pretty well, with XX Cubs and J187 going back and forth today. Anyway, let's talk Phils. Let's talk Cubs. The wind supports the idea a little bit, I think, of a decent start from Ranger Suarez here. He's another guy. I don't love the FanDuel price, kind of like Jordan Montgomery. 9,000 on FanDuel, a little bit aggressive for this pitcher. 7,000 on DK. I think that's an effective SP2. It's gonna be a guy he's already difficult to homer against, and he's got the wind at his back here. So I think there's upside for Ranger Suarez. You can see 1.64% home run rate this year, only 6.9 degrees average launch angle, gives up a little bit of premium contact in terms of the barrels, the hard hits, and the exit velo, but is good at keeping the ball in the yard. And if the wind's blowing in at Wrigley, we all know that has a limiting impact on power upside here. So Trey says, Terry, I just don't get the Detroit 1 through 5 being better than Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Tex 5 through 9. I totally agree. I totally agree that Detroit's 1 through 5 isn't better than those guys. Are they more playable? Will they get more plate appearances? Will they pay off a DFS play more often at lower popularity in a lot of scenarios? That's where some of the nuance of what those guys were discussing comes into it for me. I didn't get a chance to sit there and read every comment in that discussion. I want to go back to it tonight and see what those guys were saying. It's a little bit It was a little bit difficult to write up 30 spots on this slate and still pay attention to the conversation in Discord. So I'll see what those points were. I know Cubs was defending one side of that, but yeah, I do kind of lean more toward you'll probably over time get more out of a low-owned top of a lineup than a limited plate appearances, more popular bottom of a lineup, I think. All right, so Phillies going up against Jameson Taillon. I think there is upside for Phil's bats here, but it's a little bit capped by the wind. Taillon's not a bad pitcher, but he's not a good one either at this point. He's like a little bit below league average probably overall when it all is said and done. Right now sitting well below league average at a 6.71 ERA, a 5.19 xFIP, only striking out 18.8, giving up a decent amount of premium contact. I just worry a little bit about that wind upside or that wind downside. I don't like to get too carried away on environmental factors, but in this ballpark, it has been proven over time to be a little bit of a factor. More so to enhance when it's blowing out, in my mind, than limit when it's blowing in. Like a Kyle Schwarber, you can't convince me can't hit a ball through a 10-mile-an-hour headwind. I am confident that he can do that. I'm fairly confident in that 14-plus mark in the home run model. Harper, tons of power there, obviously, although it hasn't really shown this season after the Tommy John surgery. So maybe a little bit of lingering impact for Bryce Harper. We see that with pitchers who go through that surgery. It takes a little while to get the full strength back, full velo back. So maybe Harper's having a similar impact with hitting. Nick Castellanos, if anybody can explain to me why Nick Castellanos is priced at $4,300, your subscription today to rotoscouts today is free, which it already is. But I do not understand this. He's been raking for the month of June. He's been raking all season. He is this hitter over time, like seasons past when he was with the Reds. This was Nick Castellanos. He's not doing anything out of line. He's out of line with like last year's underperformance, but he's been very good this year. I don't get why he's so cheap on DK. Take advantage. It helps your roster. Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto. Love the bottom end of this lineup. I've talked about it up and down. Stott, Bohm, Marsh, Clemens. There's a ton of quality in that bottom four. Good home run upside, good on base acumen, good correlated scoring, a little bit of speed with all those guys, a variety of price points, lefty, righty, lefty, lefty. You can play the matchups game, you can play the position game, price game. A lot to do with that bottom third for the Phillies. It's just not a great spot for that power output. Like if I'm questioning some of the power marks, maybe the Cody Clemens 7.11 is maybe a little less believable just because I've got less history with the guy. He does hit for a lot of power, but a 39.6% hard hit rate is not a 47.2. I would suspect that his average exit velocity generated is lower than Kyle Schwarber's. I would suspect that his high point for exit velocity is lower than Kyle Schwarber. So different hitters at different ends of the lineup there. But more interested in the Phillies bats than the Cubs bats at this point. I expect Ranger Suarez to limit the output for the Cubs in general. They're going to need to sequence. They're going to need to use their on-base skills, which they do have through the heart of that lineup, to score runs against Suarez. But I think that amounts to 4 or 5 runs, not 10 to 12 runs, one of these big DFS games with 2 home runs, 3 home runs that we need. So not a great DFS spot. Maybe they score some runs, maybe they don't. But for me, if I'm going there, a few shares of Nico off the top of the lineup, assuming that's where he lands, Seiya Suzuki, Chris Morel, Dansby, Ian Happ. That's kind of where it stops in that 5 spot with Happ, and then you're dealing with some mix and match pieces of limited quality from Mancini, Gomes, Amaya, and Madrigal at the bottom of the lineup. That pronunciation of Madrigal came through my head because when we went to Disney with my niece, she got this doll from the movie Encanto. And I guess their family's name, I didn't see it, but I guess their family's name is Madrigal, like the Spanish pronunciation of that same last name. And it sang, you pull the string or hit the button or whatever, and it sang exactly one song. And the key lyric was, "Welcome to the family Madrigal." And it had this just little earworm hook, so that the entire trip to Disney, I was just walking through the house or walking through Disney going, dun, 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 which was the beat of that song. I'm not going to actually sing for you guys. That's Eric Lindquist's job. But that's where that pronunciation just crept in through my brain and came out through my mouth. So Nick Madrigal at the bottom of the lineup for 23-24. Not a great option down there, is what I guess I'm trying to say. So more interested in the Phillies, more interested in Ranger Suarez if I'm rostering a pitcher, but not really on FanDuel. A little bit of value there on DK for sure. Taillon, if you wanted to throw a couple darts on DK with the memory of like a 23% strikeout rate from 2 years ago, go for it. Wind at his back. Go for it, but not a good spot. Not a good spot for, in my opinion. More interested in Phillies bats. Hunter, I do like Wu quite a bit today. Definite strikeout upside. Kid, I think, is a very good pitcher. Very good young pitcher. That Mariner staff is excellent. So I do like that spot. If you've got to duck out in a hurry. We'll get there. Hopefully, at some point. It's 5:30. I'm going to try and wrap this by 6 so I can actually build lineups for this slate. There's a lot to do. All right, so let's talk this one through pretty quickly. The Guardians. The Guardians' bats are looking pretty decent on this slate for as bad as they are, but I suspect that they're going to be a little bit owned in a matchup against Brady Singer. If anybody's got a line on ownership, let me know if they're super popular today. They were drawing like 5-ish run total in Vegas, which I think would push some of the popularity. So this is a spot where, like, if they're getting a little bit of ownership, I'm happy to leave them to the public, get a few shares, but be under the field, take a few shots against Singer, who's just been lousy this season. Not that I'm saying roster Singer against them. He's just been so bad that it doesn't even justify the shares at 52.68. The pitcher I was expecting to take a big step forward this year was good over the last 2 seasons. 24.2% strikeouts last year, 22.4% the year before that as a rookie. Limited walks. Showed a lot of good signs and steps forward last year, but just has not been good this season at all. So I don't like the spot for Singer. The Guardians are very cheap, like Kevin O's saying in the chat there. So there's definite upside based on who he's been this year. He's been filthy for contact, 92.6 miles an hour. Average exit velo is way over what I'm looking for in terms of home run potential. 54.7% hard hits is one of the worst spots on the slate in terms of hard hit rate allowed. 10.1% barrels. It's been bad for Singer this year. But the Guardians have been really shitty all year long. Jose Ramirez, 12 homers on the season. That's arguably underperformance out of him. 293, 358, 514. Before that one big week, he was not looking great in terms of, you know, how everybody else was looking. He was kind of slumping along with the rest of them. He was about to slip below the league average for run creation and then came back to life a little bit over the last 2 weeks. Naylor's come back to life nicely. 291, 332, 469, 10 home runs. Good power bat there for Josh Naylor. Josh Bell's been really limited at the plate this year. 7 home runs. He should be a much better hitter than he is, but he hasn't been. Ahmed Rosario and Andres Jimenez are guys that I was expecting double-digit steals, double-digit home runs from both of those guys. They've both underperformed. 1 home run for Rosario, 4 home runs for Jimenez. Not much in the steals department, not much in the run creation department. Will Brennan, Miles Straw, mix and match plays at best from late in the lineup. Bo Naylor, a cheap rookie catcher with the idea of power, but a guy making his next plate appearance will be his 23rd this year. Hasn't hit a home run yet. Not that, that's a limiting factor. Not hitting a home run in 23 plate appearances is certainly forgivable. But just a guy who's a mid-range prospect and probably not completely fully cooked here. It's a good spot, but if they're getting popularity, I don't really need to go out of my way to roster a ton of Guardians. I do think they've got a good shot to put up a good score. I do think there are talented but flawed and underperforming players in this lineup. My point is, if a lot of them are going to be in the 10 to 12% owned range on a slate that's got all these options on it, I don't need to go down that road, even against Singer. I'll have some, but I'll probably be a little bit below the field. Don't really want to go to the Royals because I think I'm going to have a fair investment in Gavin Williams, who I think is a phenomenal young pitcher. Made one bad mistake in that first start that cost us. He hung an 0-2 curveball to, I think it was Ryan Noda, with a spot to get out of an inning. Instead, it turned into a 3-run home run. Changed the nature of that slate. Changed the nature of his ability to book the quality start. Instead of leading like 3-1, he was down 4-3, I think it was. So came out after 5 2/3. Didn't post a big strikeout total. Walked a few too many. But he is an apex pitching prospect. He has triple-digit velo that he gets to pretty effortlessly. He's got ridiculously good stuff. Against this Royals lineup that's got basically a 25% strikeout rate and some real holes in it, I expect Gavin Williams to have a good start here. 8,200 is cheap on FanDuel. I'm going to definitely get to him on FanDuel. They showed that they're willing to let him pitch into the 6th inning, so I think the quality starts in play. Big strikeout totals in play. A win is probably in play, given that the Guardians are probably going to succeed against Brady Singer at least to some degree here. The 5,900 price on DK is an outrageous mistake. That is a spot to just mash in terms of an SP2 spot. I would suspect that he's going to be really, really popular, but I think it's totally warranted at that price. Going up against this Royals lineup, they might get to him. They might hit 2 home runs in the first inning, and he's chased out of the game quickly. it is still not a mistake to have rostered that aggressively at 5,900. Just too good a pitcher to be that cheap. So we're going to Gavin Williams. Very limited interest in the Royals, and is really, now we're dealing with a lineup that doesn't have Sal Perez in it. I didn't even notice that until now. So that's another bump. That's another argument in favor of going to Gavin Williams shares. Their best hitter's not in the lineup today. Nick Pratto, Bobby Witt, MJ Melendez. That's your appealing Guardians hitter or Royals hitters. If you're going to a Royal stack, you can bolt on some Michael Garcia and some Edward Olivares. Outside of that, no thank you. Yeah, this is not a good version of the Royals lineup. That only enhances the Gavin Williams play in my mind. I like Nick Pratto. I think Nick Pratto is a talented guy, but he's striking out at a 35.8% clip and hasn't hit a home run in a while. Yeesh. A lot of talking. Kyle Isbell, Drew Waters, Nicky Lopez, Freddie Fermin. We don't need this. Big spot for Gav Williams. Could the Royals succeed? Sure. Could they blow up Gav Williams? Absolutely. He's a rookie making a second start of his career. Could happen. I'm going to find out. I'm going to be part of finding out. All right. We don't need to discuss Connor Siebold at all. If you're rostering him as a pitcher, you're completely insane. Just facts. Clay Kershaw, we definitely need to talk about. 9,700 is too cheap. 10.6 is probably a little high, given that he's pitching at Coors Field. But this is Clay Kershaw. This is a totally inept Rockies lineup. The Rockies against left-handed pitching has been the worst spot for run creation, Coors Field included, in all of baseball this season. Kershaw, even at Coors Field, has an opportunity to dominate this team. 6 innings, a win, a quality start. Maybe he was up 2, 3, 4 runs. But even in a Coors Field game, the Rocks were at like a 4.5 run implied total, which is like nothing for a Coors game. That's essentially a low threes total in any other ballpark. Love Kershaw, 28.5% strikeouts, 3.21 on the xFIP, 2.72 on the ERA. If we're going to trust anybody to pitch in Coors Field to know how to get through this game, it's Clay Kershaw. So I do think there's a good opportunity for Kershaw at probably low ownership in a Coors Field game. Even if he gets a little popular, I still want to be a part of it in a Coors Field game. 10%, 10 to 11% on Trey? Is that, assuming that, is that a DK number? If that's a DK number, that's a phenomenal spot. If it's a FanDuel number, it's a good spot. Steven Leibowitz, I did see Manoah's line. Pathetic. You give up 2 home runs to a bunch of kids that are watching the College World Series saying, I hope to get to that level someday. Bunch of 18 and 19-year-old kids in the like developmental Florida Gulf Coast League. Awful. From a guy who was like kind of a Cy Young contender a couple of years ago. Awful. 1% on FanDuel? Yeah, that's too low. That's like Sonny Gray at 0.4% the other day in that matchup that we were talking about with Gunn. That's a great spot. I don't care that it's Coors Field. I care that it's Clay Kershaw going up against this ugly Rockies lineup. I know that it's Coors Field, right? We're going into the play with eyes open to that fact. We're rostering him at low ownership and a fairly effective price because it's a Coors Field game. Like, we gain those advantages because it's Coors, not instead of Coors. So, yeah, I think that's a killer spot for Kershaw. And obviously, the Dodgers are favored by 2 touchdowns in this game. I think they're going to have an opportunity to chase that absurd total that the Angels put up. They don't want to be the only team from Los Angeles not to score 20-plus runs in Coors Field this year. I think they got a shot to do it. Obviously, you're paying a premium for these bats, but you're getting excellent bats. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Max Muncy back in the lineup. I don't think I need to sell any of these hitters at Coors Field. JD Martinez has been dominant this season, leading the team with a 301 ISO, leading the team with a 17.3% barrel rate, 51.9% hard hits. David Peralta's been hitting the ball hard this year. Capable veteran bat with 5 home runs, a decent hit tool at the plate if he's in the lineup on the left side. Hayward has been really good for home run power from time to time. Infrequent opportunities to play, typically against bad righties, but giving you a killer bat on the left side for super cheap pricing in Coors Field. Vargas and Outman at the bottom of the lineup. You can roster the Dodgers from 1 through 9 today at Coors Field against Connor Siebold. Siebold, 4.26% home runs, 8.9% barrels, a 15-degree average launch angle, 89.2 miles an hour on the average exit velo, 16.7% strikeouts. He's going to feed potential into the Dodgers. They're going to be explosively popular here, but it's totally worth it. Stephen Leibowitz says Kershaw's been up and down in Coors historically, but these Rockies bats are also kind of historically bad. Yeah, there's a lot better teams. In his long career, he faced a lot better teams than this at Coors Field in a lot of those games. These are really limited Rockies. Profar and Tovar I've talked about a ton off the top of the lineup. They've both been bad this year. McMahon loses all his quality against lefties. Not all, but a lot of his quality against lefties. He's their premium power bat. He'll have to duck CJ Cron, who is a premium power hitter on the right side of the plate, but he's just making his way back from injury. To face Clay Kershaw in your first return back from injury, I'll take the Kershaw side every day, especially against a flawed hitter like CJ Cron, who's like, he hits home runs from time to time, but that's about all CJ Cron really does. Diaz, Grichuk, Montero, Montez, Doyle. What's really threatening Clay Kershaw in that Rockies lineup? Fire away, Dodgers on both sides of the equation. You can take a couple of, Arenado back in the day with Story. Exactly. Those lineups were elite. You can take your shots with some Rockies, but don't get carried away with it. It is Coors Field. There is probably going to be, justifiable enough reason to take them at what should be low ownership. Also in a Coors Field game, there's always that corollary with the Rockies are always lower owned than their opponent, and they're also playing in Coors. I greatly prefer to do that against pitchers who aren't Clay Kershaw. So very limited interest in Rockies. Tons of interest in Dodgers. Even at popularity. Even if those Dodgers hitters are owned in the mid-teens on a massive slate, I just don't see getting away from it with a mid-7 run total. I don't love getting carried away with Coors, so I'll probably undercut, but I want a lot of it. Let's say Mookie's owned at 25. I want to be 15 to 18. I don't want to miss the boat too many times on Dodgers stacks. I'll get different in other spots, and I got a ton of pitching to do it with. All right. Gas pedal time, 5:37. All right, we're making okay time. Shohei Ohtani, fire away. 11-3, 10-8. Projects at the top of the board. Monster projection. It's Shohei Ohtani. I don't worry about a couple clunker starts in his last handful. He's elite. He's walked too many this year. 32.6% strikeout rate helps him overcome it. 13.3% swinging strike rate. Doesn't really allow hits. So despite a 10.3% walk rate, he's at a 1.04 whip. Dude's outrageously talented. He does all that as one of the best power hitting outfielders in baseball. That's how I've been writing it basically. Yesterday I was describing him as a hitter, and I said he does all that as one of the top starting pitchers in baseball, and I flipped the script today. What I hate when Ohtani pitches, obviously, is that we don't get him in the lineup. I would like this Angels lineup a lot better against Michael Kopech and all this just ridiculous contact that he's giving up this year if it had Shohei Ohtani right here. It sucks that he's not in the lineup. It sucks they haven't figured that out. I do think you can go to some Angels stacks. Do we have the lineup? We probably do. Nope. I do think you can go to Angel stacks here, but it's got that big hole, which is the problem. But there's definitely tons of power shining through. 14.4% barrels, 90 miles an hour exit velo, 4.55% home runs allowed by Kopech this year. He does have a good strikeout rate. He's got a decent swinging strike rate. He's got acumen to strike hitters out, but I think the power overcomes that. It's just how many times do I want to stack it with a hole in the lineup for DFS purposes. So I'll get to some shares of Moniak, Trout, Drury, Renfroe, Taylor Ward. We'll see how the lineup comes out. Moustakas, not great, but a lefty power hitter, 42.4% hard hits this year, 4 home runs in 139. Hasn't been tragic this year, and we've got the memory of all those good home run seasons, at least to go with on at cheap prices. So maybe some Moose if you're getting carried away with Angels. Really don't think we need to go to Kopech. He doesn't project well for me. The strikeouts are believable. He's got great stuff, elite velo, but not really doing it in terms of the walks, the xFIP, all the power available. I just don't see it for a fairly high price. If he was in the low 7s, the high 6s, then we're getting value on DK. 87 on FanDuel, I just don't think we get there. It wouldn't knock me out of my chair to see a quality start, 3 runs allowed, 6 innings, 6 strikeouts, but it's thin. And I think other guys exceed that even at price. So I'm not really going to Kopech here. Definite interest in a ton of Ohtani. I think you can roster some White Sox in small doses. Benny and Timmy have been a problem at the top of the lineup. Neither one of them creating runs above average. Benny's a lot closer at a 98 WRC plus than Timmy is at 53. Problematic for Tim. 236, 275, 277, over 233 plate appearances now. I know he was hurt and missed time, but we're talking about a healthy amount of plate appearances now, and he's just been inept. No homers, 8 stolen bases. He had those 8 stolen bases 2 months ago. Not a lot going on for Tim. Multi-position eligible now on DK is good. Second base and shortstop for 37. That's fun. But yeah, not a lot to go on. 49.34 is a good price for Luis Robert. 22 home runs on the season, a massive 297 ISO. Seems like he's hitting a homer basically every day, but not a great spot going up against Ohtani, obviously. Not a good spot for power. Ohtani only allows an 85.6 mile an hour exit velo. That's just elite. That's why guys don't hit many home runs against him. Eloy Jimenez, Andrew Vaughn, Gavin Sheets, Jake Berger. That's where you're looking for some other power hitters in this lineup. I know we're seeing a lot of green dots in that lineup, but that's only relative to what the average in these lineups is, so that's kind of a flawed way to represent this. You get a lot of low projections in this bottom half of the lineup and from Elvis Andrus here. So this is a relative green. Don't pay attention to the fact that all these guys are green. Don't go roster a ton of White Sox stacks because of that. Elvis Andrus continues to suck at the bottom of the lineup. So yeah, this one is enthusiasm about all things Angels, but with limited shares of the stacks because of no Ohtani. And then no real interest in Kopech, minor contrarian interest in the White Sox, but there are better spots. Touched on this one earlier. One of my favorite pitchers of the day, Bryan Woo, 6,900 on DK. As big a mistake as the price that we saw in Gavin Williams was, but at a higher price point. But he's done it over a little bit longer of a stretch. He's made 4 starts. He's got a 33.8% strikeout rate in the show so far. Dominating. 14.7% swinging. Excellent. 30.8% CSW. Elite stuff from Bryan Woo. Was kind of an under-the-radar, highly regarded pitching prospect who got the early call here, and it's just been really, really good. Pitches along the lines of what they're looking for organizationally, with low walk rates, good control and command, and is the, right now, exemplar of that, more so than Bryce Miller is, given his elite strikeout rate that he's posted. It's still a small sample. He's allowed a bit of premium contact, 4.05% home runs, 9.1% barrels, but all of that came in his first start. It was unfair. They called him up. They threw him into the fire against the Texas Rangers at Texas in a bad spot. He lasted 2 1/3 in that one, gave up like 6 runs. Wasn't good. Since then, dominant in his next 3 starts. Love the spot here for Bryan Woo going up against a target of a baseball team in the Washington Nationals. We talk about them against lefties from time to time. I know Lane Thomas has been really, really good this season. He's turned himself into a nice player. Thomas for 4,700, 3,500. If I'm going to Nationals bats, he's involved in everything. 130 WRC plus, 14 homers, 7 stolen bases, 297, 345, 515. Lane Thomas has turned himself into a good player in the outfield. Everybody else in this lineup is the problem. Luis Garcia, fine. He's not a pitcher, obviously. A moderately effective infielder with a decent hit tool, but doesn't do a lot at the plate overall. Jeimer Candelario, all his qualities come against righties this year, but Woo has a good shot to sit him down a few times here. The Nats are good at not striking out. That's the one thing they do well. 17.9% strikeout rate has to be acknowledged. Part of that is Kiebert at a 7.9% strikeout rate, which is elite. Once his power comes around, he's going to be a really good catcher. I've talked about it a few times. The X slug is way behind the actual. It's way behind the contact profile. You love the strikeout rate. You want to see more walks from him. Get him up into that Adley and Will Smith conversation in terms of catchers who don't strike out, do walk, and do hit for a little bit of power. Obviously, he's not Will Smith. Neither is Adley yet. Dom Smith, Derek Hill, C.J. Abrams. This is where your problems start to happen in this Nationals lineup. It's not a good lineup. Bryan Woo is a potentially elite pitcher. I'm not calling him an ace by any means yet. I'm not putting him in that Shohei Ohtani level yet, but he's got a trajectory to become a guy in that next tier of starters over the next couple of years. So pitcher I'm excited about. I love the price on FanDuel at 89. I'll definitely be invested there. And I think it's a great, great opportunity for value on the DK slate at 69. Jake Irvin on the other side of this one is a target for Mariners bats. I know they strike out a lot. 26.1% strikeout rate for this projected lineup is aggressively high. It's Twins-like in terms of strikeouts. You can target Mariners with better pitchers than this for strikeout upside. I just don't see it with Jake Irvin. 5,100 is a cheap hitter price on the DK slate if you want to do it. I wouldn't. 6,600 on FanDuel. I see no reason to go there. 17.4% strikeouts on the season. Could he find you like a 1 in 5 pace today? Sure. How many hitters is he going to face? So what does 1 in 5 amount to if he faces 20 hitters? Not many strikeouts. 12.1% walks, 5.66 xFIP. 2.11% home runs. He's gotten a little bit lucky to limit home runs probably. 35.7% hard hits is okay. 7% barrels, but just way too many walks, too much opportunity. No swinging strikes to speak of. No strikeouts to speak of. I think Jake Irvin's a target for the Mariners' power. And oh, by the way, they're really cheap because they strike out too much because they haven't been great this season. they've kind of underwhelmed. They've kind of underperformed overall, but there's tons and tons of counting stats in this lineup. Home runs and speed up and down. Decent WRC plus marks despite all the struggles. Good power totals that should probably be higher for a lot of these guys. So I think you can get away with a lot of Mariner stacks here. They're a good value option in this matchup. They'll probably draw a little bit of popularity for a flawed team, but I'm going to shares of Julio. I'm going to shares of Ty France, Teoscar Hernandez, Cal Raleigh, Eugenio Suarez, who homered last night, Jared Kelenic, even Mike Ford at the dead minimum on DK. 53 plate appearances, a nothing sample, but he's hit 6 home runs. He's got a 21.2% barrel rate in his batted ball events, 45.5% hard hits. He's a quad A player at best, not a guy who belongs at the major league level over time. Strikes out at a 34% clip. When he's not hitting a home run, he's basically striking out. But I think he can get to some Mike Ford for those prices at first base. It's not ideal to replace even Ty France with too many shares of Mike Ford. And it's certainly not ideal to replace like a Slate leading home run rate Pete Alonso at first base with too many shares of Mike Ford. But you're saving about half the cost. You're getting a decent home run upside. So a few shares of Mike Ford value. But really, you're making your living, like here with these Mariners. And I think there's good reason to go to it today. Let's keep on rolling. Only 2 games to talk about. Good thing because it's 5:46. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Fortunately, I did put my placeholders in. It's funny. Yesterday, after I got off the air with Gunn, I realized I didn't put my placeholders in, and I had to sit there like frantically hitting the enter button on FanDuel because the tournament was full. So I was like, I crackheaded my way to my 150 lineups just by somebody cancels one, I grab it. Somebody cancels one, I grab it. But it doesn't feel good to use like an hour and a half of time to do that. It feels a little compulsive and a little bit like I could have just taken the day off. Granted, I ended up having a good day, so I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, not a great way to go about things. So then last night I was like, well, let me not have that happen again because it's a huge slate and I have a ton to talk about. It's going to be a long show. Let me put my lineups in like a smart person today. So I put them in last night before I went to bed, all taken care of. Woke up this morning and I was firing up the model and I opened up FanDuel and I was like, what the hell, man? There's like $1,100 missing from my account. What's going on here? This is bullshit. Who stole my money? Realized you put your placeholders in already, dummy. Anyway, that's an anecdote that wasted 2 minutes. Let's talk Yankees. Let's talk A's. Paul Blackburn, 7,700, 7,800. Moderate value. 25.6% strikeouts. We've all seen Paul Blackburn succeed from time to time. He's a roughly league average pitcher over the course of time. The price is right. The projection's okay for that price. I don't think it's a great spot for to go up against the Yanks here. I know they've been struggling. They've been the worst team for runs scored in all of June. A couple other stats for all of June. They haven't been good without Aaron Judge in the lineup. Full stop. But it's Paul Blackburn. They're showing a little bit of projection, and they're really low priced. To be able to get Giancarlo Stanton at 4,600, 2,800, I will just continue to book that. It's Giancarlo Stanton. I know he's hitting 191, 252, 391. He will still obliterate the ball if he makes contact with it against Paul Blackburn. So he might strike out 4 times. He might put a 0 in my lineup. I'm willing to find out at these prices. Same thing with Rizzo. He's kind of coming back in terms of he was slumping for a while there after the neck injury. Sitting 270, 353, 430, 433. Still involved in everything they do. Power went out a little bit. It is a pitcher's park, like Stephen Leibowitz just points out in the chat there. Definitely a pitcher's park in Oakland. Not the easiest park to hit a home run in. Supports the idea of a Blackburn, quality start here. 6 innings, 4 strikeouts, quality start, cheap price. You're on your way. I get it. I wouldn't think anybody's making a mistake going to Blackburn. I think he's viable. I do think there's upside in the Yankee stack, though. Ignore this. I'm just talking about DFS. Look at those cheap prices. Gleyber Torres is a quality player to get at those cheap prices. Harrison Bader hitting second, if that's where he is in the lineup. There's a decent amount of power. There's a decent amount of speed. Good run creation ability there. Jake Bauers and Billy McKinney are not, top-end major league players. They're barely hanging on to major league jobs. They're quad A types. But if they're in the lineup at those prices, that's very, very cheap for some guys who have been flashing a little bit of power and have been productive in these opportunities that they're getting. Josh Donaldson is selling out for power. It's a home run or it's a 0 from Josh Donaldson. He's given us more zeros than he has home runs. But at those prices, 31.27, there is power there. Volpe's been bad. Counting stats only. 10 home runs, 15 stolen bases. Nothing else. But at those prices, you see the theme here? Kyle Higashioka, the contact profile for those prices. I like it less if you get Trevino. I like it less if you get IKF. There's ways that this goes even more haywire and looks like a worse lineup. If it's this version of the lineup, I'm kind of interested at value. I won't get carried away, but they project fairly well, at least through the top end for where they're priced. A lot of point per dollar value in the Yankees too. So some shares of Paul Blackburn, some shares of Yankees bats. The A's against Johnny Brito. I don't believe in Johnny Brito at all. He had a clean start the last time out, but only struck out a couple hitters. He's really not a major league pitcher. He's really, really not. 16.7% strikeout rate is accurate. 8.3% swinging strikes is accurate. He doesn't have good stuff. He's got a decent fastball and an okay changeup. When the book wasn't up to speed on him, he was effective in that first start of the year. Then they had a book on him, and he was never effective again the rest of the way. He only allowed 2 hits in that last start, so that was a clean start. But didn't strike out a bunch of guys. Didn't come out and put up a dominant DFS start. 64.76, if you want to take your shots, going up against the A's is obviously the right spot to do it. It's a good ballpark for pitching. I won't argue against the spot. I just don't believe in the pitcher. I don't think he projects well for DFS purposes. I think there are good reasons that he doesn't project well for DFS purposes. And I think that could feed into a little bit of upside for the lefties, at least, on the A's. Tony Kemp, Ryan Noda, JJ Bleday, Seth Brown, maybe some shares of Jace Peterson, maybe some flex shares of Tyler Wade at the dead minimum with 3 position eligibility on FanDuel. It's a really bad lineup. It's a really bad team. I don't like it, but I think I prefer the limited shares of left-handed A's over the Johnny Brito play in total, like as a whole. I would leave Johnny Brito on the table and take shares of A's if somebody put a gun to my head and said I had to pick a side. Not that I want to do that, because it's DFS, so you don't have to. You can take neither side in the discussion. You can pick and choose. You can choose to die on that Johnny Brito hill. I'm sure some Yankees fans will do that tonight. I don't want to be a part of that. I am almost definitely going to fully take him out of my player pool. Well, see, this is where we run into trouble. I hate doing that. I only do it with like the bottom couple guys. Like Connor Siebold will get forklifted out of my optimizer today so that there's no chance that I get him no matter what. Brito's like a small tick above that because he's not pitching in Coors Field against the Dodgers. He's pitching in Oakland against the A's. That's the only thing that would keep him in my player pool. I want 5 shares in 150 lineups at the absolute most on FanDuel. You can maybe get a few more shares on DK, but it's a bad pitcher. It's a non-major league talent going up against a non-major league lineup in a football stadium. All right, let's keep on going. We got the last game to talk about here. The voice is starting to go. Turning into Gundacker. Tampa Bay Rays, Arizona Diamondbacks. Good pitching matchup for the last game of the day. Taj Bradley, 94.99, projects fairly well. Going up against what is a good Diamondbacks lineup that is good at limiting strikeouts. That's where I get a little concerned on Bradley. I wish it was either a little bit cheaper or he's probably not going to be that popular. So maybe I gain a little bit of that tax back with a lack of popularity. I just don't love the 18 and change strikeout rate for the productive hitters in this Diamondbacks lineup. You get higher strikeout rates from some of the less productive hitters, but the productive guys, the power hitters, all strike out at pretty good rates, pretty low rates. So a little bit of a blemish for Bradley, but I suspect he'll be fairly lowish owned. Fairly lowish. Is that a thing? I suspect he'll be somewhat low owned. 34.5% strikeouts is elite, obviously. 12% swinging strikes, the 3.86 ERA. A better 2.74 xFIP means he's been pitching better under the covers than on the surface. There's a lot to like about the spot for Bradley here. I just don't love tangling with the Diamondbacks on such a big slate when I don't absolutely have to. You could get that late night hammer performance from him. I think it's probably more likely that you get it from Zach Gallen on the other side of this one, despite the fact that he's going up against these Rays. There's more strikeouts in that Rays lineup. There's probably more, upside potential. They've got a lot of guys who are playing above their heads overall, if we're being perfectly honest with one another. But they've been doing it all season, so we have to keep giving them the credit for it. But Gallen's been elite this year too. 26.4% strikeouts, 5.1% on the walks, 3.41 on the xFIP, 2.84 on the ERA. Come back to earth a little bit in the last few starts, but I think that gives us more reason to go there. I think it lowered his price. 99, 10,000. It's a pretty effective price for this pitcher in this spot. So assuming low ownership, assuming that price is of, I don't know what my second assumption was going to be. Forget I said assuming. Just taking on the surface, what he's done this year and who he's been over time. I think there's plenty of upside for Zach Gallen against the team with, for all their quality, a 24% strikeout rate in that projected lineup. A guy who's been outrageously good in terms of his counting stats, Jose Siri, still striking out 33.3% of the time. Taylor Walls, Josh Lowe, 25%. Mejia and Brujan bringing up the bottom of that lineup. Not you, Siri.
Taylor Walls, Josh Lowe, 20.
A different Siri. It's not the dog, it's the goddamn phone. All right. So if you go to Zach Gallen against the Rays, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to be as popular as he probably should be. It could fail. I will take some hedge stacks of the Rays on the other side here. I think they're a little bit high priced, but they're probably not going to be that crazy popular going up against Gallen. So you can string together some Johnny Diaz, Wander Franco, Luke Raley, Arosarena, Lowe, Walls, Siri. She didn't do it. Rays not good on the East Coast. Strikeouts are there. Well, they're playing in the desert out west, though. I assume you meant the West Coast. Not exactly the coast, Arizona, but, out west. Anyway, so I'm going to Gallen, and it's not necessarily because of the, Rays not being good on one coast or the other. I just think he's talented enough, and I think there's enough strikeouts there that, it might be a case where the field misses the boat on a very, very good pitcher who is against a good team, but is talented enough to get through it and post a good score. So at price especially, I think Gallen's got upside. You're saving like $1,000 as compared to the Framber Valdez's of the world, who I do like quite a bit. Go to some shares of the Rays on the other side. Definitely want to go to some shares of the Diamondbacks against Bradley, but I don't want to get carried away with that one either. He's been very, very good this year. So more pitching, I think, than hitting on both sides in this one, but I would take all four corners in this. The D-backs have been great. Perdomo, good spot for him at the top of the lineup, 398 on base. Correlates very nicely with Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll. Christian Walker. Walker's a really good first baseman, really good power profile, 15 homers on the season at 239 ISO. Got to remember, he started all of April and the first part of May really, really cold and has really come on in terms of his power. His hard hit rate is up to 42.9, 9.7% barrels. He doesn't have elite 50+% contact. Doesn't have like crazy, 15% barrel rates. Imagine if he did, because the dude only strikes out 16% of the time this year, 19.6% last year. So he's not one of these all or nothing Joey Gallo type free swingers. He's a good contact hitter. He's a good just hitter. 282, 346, 521. Really like Christian Walker in the heart of that lineup. A lot of that applies to Luis Gurriel as well. Less power for Gurriel, but a really good hit tool. Doesn't strike out much. Emmanuel Rivera has been really good, over 148 plate appearances, 314, 338, 407. That'll all come back to earth in a bigger sample. But right now, 2,700, 2,600 at third base, it's a decent buy. Thomas and McCarthy, like double-digit-ish type counting stats, like 15 homer, 15 steal type guys in terms of what they project to. McCarthy's stolen 16 bases, but has only hit 2 home runs. Thomas has only hit 3 home runs, stolen 4 bases. Limited samples, both been in the minors for a lot of the season, so they probably would finish around that, but they're not like elite options. They're mix and match plays. So is Gabe Marino at the bottom of the lineup. I think that's it, gang, which is good because it's 6 o'clock. Joker's excited. Joker's telling me you got to build lineups, dummy. So let's take a quick look at the pitching board, and then I'm going to punch out for the day and start building lineups. Shohei Ohtani, not a big surprise to see at the top of the pitching board, followed by Framber Valdez, Kevin Gausman, Zach Gallen. A lot of familiar names here. That top 4 pitchers, Ohtani, Valdez, Gausman, and Gallen, I want to get a lot of. I think those guys are a clear step above Andrew Abbott, despite how well he projects. I think there are, some potential flaws in what we're seeing in the projection from Abbott based on what he's done versus what he might actually be. I think he's a very, very talented kid. I just fear that maybe he comes back to earth a little bit based on what we see under the covers. Jordan Montgomery, great projection here. I'm a little bit hesitant to call that a real projection. And at 91 going up against the Astros, I don't love that spot. I do think you get a lot of meat on the bone from Montgomery at 72 as an SP2 on DK, though. It's not the Astros that we all remember. They're good at not striking out, but you're not really looking at Montgomery for strikeouts. You're looking for 7 clean innings and a win. You might get that. The win is in question going up against Valdez, but that should be a good left-handed pitching duel there. I like Montgomery at the 72 on DK. I love Gavin Williams at 59 on DK. I love Gavin Williams at 82 on FanDuel. I will get to a ton of Gavin Williams. If I was playing on DK, I would have an embarrassingly high share of Gavin Williams in that spot. At the same time, Brian Wu for 69 is just as good, if not better, in the spot, in the strikeout rate. Both of those kids are elite options for value on DK. Mix and match them to your heart's content. And then sitting in the middle of them is the veteran on the other side of his career going up against the lousy Tigers, Martin Perez at a similar price, 57. I don't know that I need to go to him as much as I'll go to Wu and Gavin Williams on the FanDuel slate at 8,000. But at 57 on DK, I do think you need competitive shares of Martin Perez value over there. Bryce Elder's on the board. Clayton Kershaw's on the board. Joe Ryan's on the board. Taj Bradley's on the board. David Peterson's on the board for value. 7,300, 6,600. We talked about that spot. There's a ton of upside. If the weather, let's talk about the weather. It doesn't look like it's raining outside right now. It's 6 o'clock. Game doesn't start too far from now. Those storms might come rolling in. Keep an eye on it. Right now, if I was going to the game based on how it looks outside and not looking at weather forecasts, I'd be going. Bottom of the board here. Tyler Wells, you could get something out of at the bottom of the lineup. Paul Blackburn, you could get something out of. Garrett Whitlock, I talked about liking quite a bit. He projects down board a little bit for me, but I like that spot. And then look who's lurking all the way the hell down here. One spot ahead of Johnny Brito. Sandy Alcantara. Like, would it surprise anybody, really? Really, if we're being honest, if Sandy Alcantara blows the doors off the slate at 8,479? It wouldn't surprise me. He doesn't project great by any means. It's a bad spot in Fenway Park against the Red Sox. But at those prices, that's all baked into those prices. Fun slate, 15 games, 30 teams to choose from, 30 pitchers to choose from. If we're being honest, it's probably more like, 20-ish, somewhere around there. There's a lot of guys you can cut out of that pitching slate, but there's a lot of good pitching options. Fewer hitting options, but I think a lot of great spots today. Dodgers at Coors Field is obviously going to be super popular, but a great spot. All right, gang, that's it. Good luck tonight. Somebody go win something. I don't care if my logo's on it or not, but if it is, that's great for me. Would appreciate it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, jump into our Discord, check out the site at rotoscouts.com. Check out Gundacker's site. I know he wasn't on the air today, so I'll give the guy a little plug. He's still got his great promo going where you're getting football and basketball for free. Killer content from Gun as well. But yeah, rotoscouts.com. Discord is linked in the description here. Everything's linked from the description. It's also linked at the top of the site. With that, I am going to wish you guys good luck one more time and then hit the end broadcast button. Good luck, gang.